Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the news that a member of the EU's Brexit team has tested positive for COVID, what that's going to mean for the ailing Brexit negotiations between the UK and the EU, along with what happened during the EU summit yesterday as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as a result of a positive test on the part of someone within Michel Barnier's team, there's been a withdrawal of some face-to-face meetings. Barnier, for example, has to now go into isolation. And he announced that he'd been in contact with David Frost, who is the UK's chief negotiator, his counterpart, and that talks at their level would be suspended for a short time, as they put it. Now, there are three things that come to mind at this point. The first of which is that the talks should have already been concluded and a deal agreed. You know, that this hasn't happened is entirely down to the fact that Boris Johnson instructed David Frost to spend almost the entire year pissing about, so that if he did decide to go for a deal at the end, and it now seems, I say clear as anything can seem at the moment, it now seems clear that all the way through the year maybe Boris Johnson wasn't sure whether he wanted a deal or not. But that if he did, he wanted to get it at the last possible moment so that he could say that he didn't blink and he went right to the wire and all the rest of it and got the best possible deal. But the problem with brinksmanship of this kind is that you leave yourself with no margin for error on the execution. And if something unexpected happens at the last possible moment, then you basically have the rug pulled out from under your feet. And although, you know, you could argue a positive test for a member of the negotiating team was unexpected, it was not unpredictable. It's a very real risk for anyone, particularly doing what they're doing, travelling between, well, two different countries. The second thing, that brings me on to the second point, which is that I don't understand why all these meetings had to take place face-to-face in the first place. What was the benefit to anyone? Because during the pandemic, if we look at like businesses, for example, there seems to have been a bit of a split. You know, there were those businesses who embraced the technology to carry out meetings remotely and actually, do you know what, found that they're much less stressful, much more efficient because of the lack of travel, and it allows for a better work-life balance because you're not away from your family as long. It's more efficient for the business as well because instead of having to travel great distances on work time to get to these meetings, you just log into your computer, you're already there, there's no travel time. You know, but there are those who also insisted that, sir, these meetings have to take place face-to-face. It's much better if they take place face-to-face. And these are the people who rush to get themselves and their workers back to the office. Now, that's just a mindset. Discussions can very easily take place remotely, and I see no reason why the Brexit talks could not have done likewise always. As a result, I see no reason why this should cause any delay in decisions being made. If, for example, David Frost wants to talk to Michel Barnier or vice versa, they can easily do so. They can just pick up the phone or do some video conferencing if it wants to be a team of them talking to each other as well. That's not going to be a problem. And then the third thing, so they talked about it being at his level. Barnier said at his level those talks are suspended, which of course strongly suggests that the other talks, there's quite a lot of negotiators on both sides, are taking place. Those are presumably the technical talks that are going to be needed in order to actually draft the deal if Boris Johnson agrees to it. So it could be argued that the top level talks between Barnier and Frost weren't really needed right now anyway, because let's face facts, what were they going to talk about? What were they going to discuss? David Frost has no room for manoeuvre because Boris Johnson still hasn't made his mind up about what he wants or what he'll accept. Michel Barnier has limited room for manoeuvre because he has been told by the EU Commission, by the EU Parliament, and also by EU heads of state or heads of government of those states what he can and cannot do as well. So we can well imagine that those, you know, direct talks between Barnier and Frost were going round in circles anyway. Maybe both men breathed a bit of a sigh of relief that there'd be a reason for suspending them for a little while, although the actual reason for it is not ideal. But yesterday was also the day of the EU November summit. So this is what I was expecting to talk about, which took place remotely. And the summit was characterised as a disaster planning meeting, planning for the twin disasters of COVID and Brexit, as well as a few more sort of homegrown disasters. Now, on the Brexit front, the mood was a bit pessimistic France and the Netherlands suggesting that a deal was unlikely now, and that, now we need to really put in place the final no deal preparations because that's what's likely to happen. And that was it for Brexit on the summit, because just as in September, there was no wider discussion of Brexit. It wasn't really on the agenda in any serious way because it wasn't considered important enough to be there. Not that Brexit isn't important as such, but with the lack of progress made since October, what did they have to discuss? What was there to talk about? Because there's nothing they can do. This is now down to Boris Johnson. And the EU, of course, does have other very serious problems to discuss. If it didn't, then maybe they'd have fitted it in somewhere just to discuss something. But they do. Because, first of all, there's the issue of Turkey. That country that Boris Johnson told everyone would be joining the EU against Britain's will, which, as a member of the EU, was, of course, impossible. But, nobody ever said those who follow Brexit were well informed. Then there's their own in-house problems of Hungary and Poland, trying to do their own little Trump dystopia impressions. And then, just as a little aside, there's the biblical plague continuing to rip through their territories, creating huge economic ramifications if they get decisions wrong. So, yeah, given that Brexit is a disaster unfolding entirely at the will of a madman in London, and that they've spent years preparing for this day, it's not even like they need to make decisions on the preparation. The preparations are in place, they just need to be implemented. There wasn't a lot to discuss, and there were much more serious things to discuss. Things where they could change something, where they could have an impact. So in terms of where we are now in the UK, because for us Brexit is super serious, because like for the EU, as a result of a no-deal Brexit, they lose trade agreements with one country. With us, we lose it with loads. We're not even just talking about the EU countries, which is over 24. There's wider ones as well. We have agreements right now in the transition period with other countries outside the EU that are also disappearing, although the EU can't really do much about that. So we're losing a lot of trade agreements. So it's much more serious from our point of view on that. And also the fact that we don't have our no deal preparations in place either. And then, we can actually do something about it. So it's a much more serious issue for us. So where we are is, like I said, we're waiting for Boris Johnson to decide what he wants. Now, obviously, he doesn't want any of the options available to him. So it might be more accurate to say it depends which he thinks is the least harmful. Because, people said years ago, Brexit had to become reality at some point. And at that point, its architects would scatter for cover. And here we are with Boris Johnson having to choose the Brexit door. He is the one in place. Everyone else wanted to steer well clear of this decision. He is the one to choose the Brexit door. And everyone else who pushed for Brexit is standing well back so that they can say afterwards, well, actually, it would have been fine, but the idiot picked the wrong door. And, Brexit can never survive contact with reality, but there are multiple Brexit realities, and only one of them can emerge, or at any one time, at any rate. So the others will claim that they supported a different path, and because it will never be put to the test to prove them wrong, they'll say, well, that was the one we should have done. Johnson is paralysed by the fact that he knows he is the one Brexiteer who cannot take that line. He cannot pretend it would have been fine, but the idiot in charge got it wrong, because he is the idiot in charge. He has to pick. He has to take responsibility for those consequences. He will attempt to take responsibility, of course, by blaming everyone else. He'll do his usual trick of saying in Parliament, I take full responsibility, but it's everyone else's fault. He does that all the time. If he agrees to a deal, he'll be attacked for selling out. If he doesn't agree to a deal, he'll be attacked for not having the no-deal preparations in place. Perhaps if he'd been a details man, he would have realised this a long time ago and recognised the poison chalice that was being a Brexit Prime Minister. Johnson now effectively has until Christmas to agree something. So initially it was, we need to get this sorted by the end of October. The reason for that is so that there would be time for the EU Parliament to go through all of their committee stages, get all the translations done, and have it ready for the 16th of December, which is when they were due to meet to vote on it. So now that's out of the window, of course. So then we were talking about, okay, They are prepared to have a special session towards the end of the year, in which case we need to agree the deal by mid-November. It's gone past mid-November now, so it's too late for that as well. So there's now no time, whatever is agreed, to go through the proper ratification process. So it is still possible to agree something before the end of the year. And depending on what it is, it could still arguably implemented for the end of the year without being ratified. It would have to be ratified later. But that's why it's going to have to be something quite light. But there we are. That is where we are right now. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.